It is Sunday, January 8th, and this is the Georgia Gang. I'm Russ Spencer in for Lori Geary. The Georgia legislature will ease into its new session this week as lawmakers keep at least one eye on the Bulldogs' defense of their national championship. Georgia lawmakers play central roles on the national stage as Republicans flail in their efforts to elect a House Speaker. And the Atlanta City Council president reverses course after a full-page ad accuses him of disrespecting black female leadership. Melita, Phil, Theron, and Martha are here this morning. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
Legislative session begins tomorrow, and like last year, the first day is expected to be a short one to give Bulldogs fans under the dome a chance to get to the big game. Governor Kemp's inauguration for his second term set for Thursday. The other two legs of the traditional three-legged stool at the Capitol, we're talking about the governor, lieutenant governor, and House Speaker, are new to their jobs. John Burns replaces the late David Ralston as House Speaker. Burt Jones is the new lieutenant governor, of course. The panel is here. 3 of the 5 of us are wearing red and black. Theron and I are also Dogs fans, so
go Dogs. We got to get done the record early on.
Exactly.
We just missed the memo.
Exactly. All right. So Martha, talk to us about this new dynamic. What are you expecting this year from this session?
Well, I think that the big question is how involved will Governor Kemp be? He has been kind of hands-off. Certainly we knew what the governor's agenda was up until this point, but you didn't see as much of him because he liked to let the legislative process play out. We might see more of him in this legislative session than we've seen in the past. That's what I'm particularly looking for, but also I don't know John Burns that well or his style of management, so I'll be watching that also. And then, of course, Lieutenant Governor Jones is going to be, a new commodity too. So there's a lot of new things. I always look for what is the big social issue that's going to come up. So I don't know what that is yet, but we'll know in a week or so.
All right, Theron, Democrats have to still be smarting from losing all the statewide races with the exception of the U.S. Senate race. What's the strategy? What are you looking for as priorities in this new session?
Well, I talked to a lot of Democrats, state reps, state senators who are returning, but also you have 50-plus new legislators coming to the legislature from the Democratic and Republican side, but particularly Leader Beverly and Leader Butler. Senator Gloria Butler is the leader of the Democratic caucus in the Senate. James Barely is the leader in the House. And what they're focusing on, Russ, is really making sure that, one, the party is unified in the caucus, but then, 2, understanding they can't get bills passed just with Democratic support.
Right.
So I think you'll see a confluence of them pushing big Democratic issues like we got to have a conversation about Medicaid expansion in the state. We also got to have a conversation about more of a livable wage, working class Georgians feeling supported. But I think you'll see some deal making with Republicans to try to really get some things done this session for Democrats.
Okay. Now both Governor Kemp and Lieutenant Governor Jones have made it clear that crime is high on their agendas. The governor tweeted an article about the dismissal of a child sex indictment in Athens in a tweet writing, "Far-left local prosecutors are failing their constituents and making our communities less safe. I look forward to working with members of the General Assembly and Attorney General Chris Carr to address that this session." Burt Jones responded to the shooting death of an off-duty Fulton County deputy with this: "Enough is enough. As Lieutenant Governor, we're going to tackle this issue head on and work to restore law and order to our streets starting very soon." And Phil, the governor, as you know, weighed in on the protests against what the protesters are calling Cop City. What's your take on all of this?
Well, thankfully, the Republicans do control both chambers of the House and Senate and the General Assembly, and crime is going to be a big one. I'll get to that in a second, but I think another big one, which all Georgians ought to be happy about, is that your state income tax is going to be cut and reduced. That's going to help everybody's wallet. And I think that with regard to crime, that's always been a Republican strong point. The Democrats have been the weak link on that. And so you'll see toughening up our anti-gang statutes. These are all Democrats. There's about 5 Democrat district attorneys that, as the governor said, are far left. The one in Athens, Clark County, actually announced what crimes that she wouldn't prosecute. It's terrible. It's permissive. And so you'll see a tightening up of those laws and trying to hold those prosecutors accountable. And with regard to the radicals over there in DeKalb County, where the police training center is for the Atlanta police, this has gotten way out of hand. Thank God the state stepped in. The GBI and the Atlanta police have arrested some recently. Again, 6 of them. And this is what makes you mad. 6 of them were given a low bond by this DeKalb County judge, Matthews, and they're all out there. I think one of them was $6,000. The highest was $13,500. What is all that? They threw bombs at police. They caused over $1 million worth of damage, and this is the type of liberal permissiveness that we don't want in the state.
All right, Lita, he says Democrats are the weak link on crime.
Well, you also can't divorce crime from the very permissive gun legislation Republicans have pushed. There was a big Washington Post look at all of this earlier in the week of that arrest back in March of last year where the gentleman was, well, I won't call him a gentleman. The man had multiple weapons, including an AR-15 that were loaded. He was putting on a vest. And he was arrested and originally charged with 11 felonies. But because of these permissive, guns everywhere, Republican passed legislation, they had to drop those charges down to 10 misdemeanor reckless conduct charges. And I don't know about you, but if I see somebody walking through the grocery store with an AR-15, I'm going to abandon my shopping cart and go home.
I think I might too. Martha, how about you?
Look, I think that what we got to be really clear about, though, when you're talking about guns is legal gun owners versus people that are using guns illegally. And I think we're seeing not only among Republicans, but I've talked to a lot of my Democrat friends, I've talked to a lot of people on all sides, is that they want to see that distinction. And we're starting to see some differences in how people are talking about this issue. It's not just as clear-cut as it's been. So I think we need to look for more of that.
All right, let's change gears. Could this be the year that the General Assembly approves sports betting in Georgia? Lieutenant Governor Jones has sponsored legislation to legalize gaming in the past, and Governor Kemp, who previously opposed the move, has said that he's open to working on it this year. Now, it's been a perennial issue since the U.S. Supreme Court raised the possibility. Do you think it'll get across the line there?
Well, I had the opportunity to work on this very important issue with a coalition of folks last session, and we were able to make some really good progress on sports betting. But then, as you guys remember, everything was kind of looped in together.
With the casinos and everything else.
Gambling,
right.
Horse racing, and sports betting. And so I think that hearing the lieutenant governor now who's pushing for gambling, the governor saying, hey, I'm open to working with this, I think is a really good sign that this has the momentum that it needs. I also think you'll see different organizations come together to really make the economic impact message that, hey, at a time where we're about to, in 2025, get the National College Football playoffs, in 2026 we're going to get the FIFA World Cup, that Atlanta and Georgia has got to be prepared to be up on the times when these economic opportunities are coming to our state. And then lastly, look, the conversations are being had early with both caucuses. There were some Republicans who had some concerns about sports betting, gambling, and horse racing, in particular around sports betting. And also the Democratic caucus, when you got Minority Leader James Beverly saying, hey, sports betting done correctly with needs-based attached to it in the Hope Scholarship, if it's done that way, he's also open to pushing in the caucus as well. So I think it's off to a good start.
Well, as you know, Phil, other states are doing it. Time for Georgia or not?
Well, that's right. I think it is time for Georgia because this is a lot of lost revenue, and we can use the revenue. Theron framed this pretty well with the three forms of gaming, and I think sports betting probably does have the best shot. The other two, the horse racing, which is local option pari-mutuel wagering, as well as the casino gaming, those are actually constitutional amendments. So voters ultimately have to decide, and I'm in favor of voters deciding on things. So even if you're opposed to this, why not let it play out? The legislature would have to approve it, and then if they want, for example, casino gaming in Chatham County in Savannah, then it would be a vote of those local folks.
Melita, what do you think?
Well, you already have some offshore gaming on those boats that go outside of Savannah and the Georgia coast. So, and that money doesn't come back to the local governments or the state government for disbursement to state issues. So I think it's probably pretty inevitable. But I think Theron's point about the high number of new legislators, more than 20% of the total legislature are freshman legislators. And so none of us know, not even the lobbyists, how all of them are going to vote and what they think about the issues. So there's never been such a large freshman class.
Okay. People went back to the polls in North Georgia, in Georgia's 7th House District. We mentioned the late Speaker David Ralston. His wife, his widow, is running for his seat to fill out the rest of his term. And she ended up in a runoff with Jack Chastain. If I'm not mistaken, it was, let's see, I know I wrote it down here. I think it was 45 to 39, but we know that in many cases, whoever ends up first when it gets to a runoff is not the ultimate winner. What are you looking for in this one, Martha?
Well, I'll tell you what, it's interesting because they kind of come out of the same sort of group of voters. I mean, even though she does have the Ralston name, they were both on the Development Authority and have been involved with some of the same people. I think she probably has the inside track just because of name recognition, but you are right that generally the person that's first and under 45%, which is right around that area, doesn't win in the runoff.
Yeah, and then in House 119, Mr. Rampey got arrested after being elected, and
Multiple felonies.
7 have qualified.
Right, and there's going to be a special election at the end of this month on the governor's orders. What do you think?
Well, there are 5 Republicans and 1 Democrat who qualified for that seat. And I think it'll be a robust primary with a runoff then in February.
Well, the good news is they're both solid Republican districts, so may the best person win. I do think in former Speaker, late Speaker Ralston's district, it's obviously going to be a low turnout in both those races, and so it gets tricky, as we all know. We've all witnessed this. But I do think let the best person win. I don't think Ms. Ralston has really campaigned, and that's kind of maybe a rookie mistake. She's trying to stay away from the media, and that is a big mistake.
Yeah, but I think she's campaigning. She may not be talking to the media as much as you think, but to say that she's not campaigning is not true. I think she really wants to do everything she can to earn the voters' support.
But as you well know, you need the media to reach the voters.
Yeah, but I don't want our viewers to think that she's not campaigning. She is campaigning.
I think she'll have a robust campaign now that it's down to 2 candidates. Right. I think it'd be interesting to see what the next Fannin County Development Authority meeting will be like, since she's their executive director and her opponent is on the board.
Right.
You know, it's ironic that Charles Bullock, who's just kind of like the dean of Southern
everything
politics,
political,
everything
sure.
political. The first paper he ever wrote was about women in politics and how they got there because their husband's dying. So I think it's kind of an interesting juxtaposition there.
Well, she would have a very interesting role in the General Assembly because all of the Republicans don't know how much she knows, and knowledge is power.
Okay, we'll leave it there for the moment. Coming up, Georgia's role in the historic drama on Capitol Hill over choosing a House Speaker. We'll be right back.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
2 members of Congress from Georgia have played key roles on opposite sides of the Republican fight over choosing a House Speaker. The 9th District's Andrew Clyde has voted against Kevin McCarthy each of the 11 times the House has voted. One of 20 hard-right conservatives who have deprived McCarthy of the 218 votes he needs to win the speakership. This is, of course, being recorded on Friday. Things may have changed by the time this airs. 14th District Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene is one of McCarthy's staunch supporters and stands to get plum committee assignments if he is ultimately successful. She has criticized McCarthy's opponents, with whom she agrees on most things, saying they're being dramatic and the American people don't want drama. That from Marjorie Taylor Greene. Now, you spoke to Andrew Clyde this week. What's your take on all this, Mark?
Yeah, so Andrew Clyde acknowledges that probably at the beginning of this week that his group of 20 didn't probably communicate as well as they could have of what they were looking for to the public so that they understood what was going on, that he feels like there's been some progress made, and that, you know, I'm hoping that we're going to have a resolution to this. They love getting out on Friday, so who knows what might happen at the time of our taping. On Marjorie Taylor Greene front, what's so interesting about her is that from people that know her very well think that the Marjorie Taylor Greene they're seeing is more like the one they've seen run Taylor Construction for so many years. You know, a very different kind of personality, and she has an interesting position because she didn't have any committee assignments prior to this point. They had been stripped from her, so she has a more independent approach to this. So it is really interesting to watch. I think ultimately Kevin McCarthy gets the votes. We don't know what's going to happen, but I think ultimately he's going to make enough concessions. But what will that do to his speakership?
Yeah, right. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene has been sitting at the right hand of Kevin McCarthy for much of the time there in the gallery and been a staunch supporter. This is a woman who a month ago in New York told a Republican crowd that if she and Steve Bannon had organized January 6th, they would have won and would have been armed. She said she was being sarcastic. But what do you make of her being the voice of reason in all of this?
Well, let's just look at this of what's really going on. It's just complete dysfunction. I'm really embarrassed to see what's really going on in Congress right now. I mean, we do not have an elected speaker, And we do not have House members,
Right.
435 of them in the country, that are not reinstated and elected to serve their constituents.
Can't be sworn in until
Can't
they
be
have a
sworn
speaker.
in
Yeah.
until we have a speaker. And so this is not only dysfunction, this is a complete Republican circus that really a lot of people should be talking about, because it's all of this pandering, all of this posturing, all of these different beliefs about where the Republican Party should be going for. And I want to commend Hakeem Jeffries, who I think said it best. You know, you hear all these Republicans now coming forward saying we want decorum. You know, we want to work together. Well, why don't you start in your own party first? And I think that, you know, you see Democrats sitting back really saying, hey, this is dysfunctional and that we need to move on to do the people's work. There are a lot of American people right now that want this Congress to get their acts together. And so I'm not going to focus on Marjorie Taylor Greene and other members of the Republican Congress in Georgia. I just think that when you look at this and you can't get on the same page to elect a speaker, and the Republicans are in control, the Democrats are no longer in control, so you can't blame this on us. I just think that we got to call it what it is, and that is it's a dysfunction circus, and really the American people are the ones that are hurting because they elected these men and women to go back to Washington to get things done.
All right, Phil, your reaction. Do you think that Chip Roy has a point when it comes to changing the rules so that members have more involvement when it comes to voting on spending bills?
I think you're totally exaggerating this dysfunction word. That's your word of the day. I think that Chip Roy is right. I'm a conservative. I wouldn't mind all of these things to be have it in the rules, like no more omnibuses like the liberals want, the big taxers and the big spenders, more transparency. These are what the conservatives want, et cetera, et cetera. There's nothing wrong with people in either party trying to have their leadership being pushed to do their issues. That's what we do in politics in this constitutional republic. So I think this will all be sorted out. I don't see where the republic is going to collapse the way Theron's talking. I actually think that McCarthy will probably hang in there and eventually get the votes. Again, as you point out, Russ, it is Friday and we're airing on Sunday. But I think at some point, while I like the conservatives trying to get concessions, at some point you do have to have a team and you have to have a captain.
So, Melita, is this democracy in action or is this dysfunction? What do you think?
Oh, I agree with Theron that it's dysfunction, but I also think that if this resolves in McCarthy's favor, he will be a weaker speaker. And what we have seen this week certainly improves the reputation of Nancy Pelosi. No one ever doubts that the woman knew how to corral votes, count votes, and make things happen.
Look, I got to add one thing, though. This is no different than what has been happening for the last 2 years in the Senate, where it was a 50-50 Senate, and there were 2 senators that were continuing to thwart the Democrats on the other side. It's a smaller number because there's only 100 senators. But I think what this is more a reflection of is that this 50-50 place we're in the country. It happens to be the Republicans now, and it's the way democracy works, and it's the way our constitutional democracy works. But what happened in the Senate over the last 2 years, where they had to kowtow to Manchin and Sinema in order to get what they wanted done, and they ultimately got some very good bipartisan things done by doing that. So let's not predict that this is going to be doom and gloom when we've seen how it worked over the last 2 years in the Senate.
Okay. But as we sit here, some of these folks refuse to take yes for an answer when we're talking about Boebert, Gates, Biggs, Gosar. They basically have gotten everything
Well, as long
they
as
asked
it stays
for.
to those 4, they can make the shift.
Martha makes a really good point. This is not the first time we've taken a while to elect a speaker in our country's history. The difference between what you'd explained is a 50-50 split in the U.S. Senate is totally different between the caucus coming together and actually electing a speaker. And I think that there's a lot of games that are being played. We all talked about this. We heard that McCarthy was going to have some challenges leading up to this vote.
Sure.
So it's not a surprise that he's struggling right now.
No,
All right,
a lot of Republicans are pretty individualistic as opposed to, let's say, the House Democratic caucus, where it's like the old Soviet Communist Party. They all vote in one line.
All right.
That's not true.
That's all the time we have for this segment. Coming up, I enjoyed it. Speaking of drama, the Atlanta City Council president's efforts to shuffle committees didn't go over so well. We'll talk about that when we come back.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
Atlanta City Council President Doug Shipman thought it would be a good idea to shuffle committee chairs to freshen things up. Two members did not agree and paid for an ad in the AJC calling him out, saying his move would have ended black female leadership in the city for the first time in nearly 4 decades. For the record, Shipman had appointed 2 black men to lead committees, and after the uproar, Shipman agreed to keep Marcy Collier Overstreet at the head of the zoning committee. Other committee chairs include Liliana Bakhtiari, who's a gay and Muslim, Amir Farouki, an Iranian American, and Alex Wan, the city's first Asian American council member. So there is plenty of diversity, but what do we make of all of this? You're looking at me pretty intently. What do you think about this, Phil?
Well, you talk about dysfunction. I think this is an Atlanta City Council soap opera. Here you have this progressive liberal Doug Shipman, who's tone deaf, obviously, and didn't want to put any female black committee chairs on. And of course, what do the 2 committee chairs do? And they're pretty competent folks, let me just say that. They do this flaming sword ad in last Sunday's Atlanta Journal-Constitution, essentially calling Shipman a bigot. Well, he's not. And then, but that ploy worked, and so Shipman caved, and now you have female chairs. So again, this is politics at the local level. We were talking about the Republicans at the national level. It's all Democrats on the Atlanta City Council, but they have the factions just like Republicans.
What do you think there?
Well, I think the first thing I want to do is I want to commend Marcy Overstreet and Andrea Boone for actually stepping up and actually paying for a piece that was well written and that clearly articulated their version of what happened. These are 2 women who not only are leaders in the city, but I've known Andrea Boone for over 20 years. I've known Marcy Collier Overstreet for 10 years. And so I think the fact that they articulated that this is the first time in 40 years where, if you look at the city of Atlanta, this is Atlanta, Russ. This ain't other cities. This is Atlanta. And black female leadership has played a pivotal role in all of our success in this city. So to not have a black woman leading a committee was a mistake on Doug Shipman's part. And so I think if you really look at what the 2 women were saying is that, hey, we have earned this right to serve, and it was taken away from us, and we want to be able to articulate this to the public of why we feel that in the city of like Atlanta, where black females are counted on as the #1 voting bloc for Democrats to get elected, they should be represented when it comes to city council. But let me also say this, Doug Shipman, another person who I've known for a very long time, I don't believe it was his intent to create this uproar. I think that he truly wanted to make sure that it was diversity
change things up
and rotation.
Yeah.
And also, look, we also need to point out that he did make these 2 women chairmen for the first time last year. So this is the first time that Councilwoman Boone and Councilwoman Overstreet had actually served as chairs of committees. But I think that it was a political mistake and a political oversight to not actually have a black woman serve a committee. Last thing I would say, and I won't name names, but I was very proud of the city council. They came together privately, and when the switch happened, there was some particular council members who actually came together and said, look, we don't want this chaos and dysfunction like we're seeing in Washington to happen at the city council meeting. Let's get together, let's make the switch. And I think that Doug Shipman did the right thing by putting Marcy Overstreet back on the committee. And lastly, I think you'll see some civility. They will heal. These council members will come together moving forward.
All right, I got 45 seconds left. I'll give it to the other Democrat out here.
Well, the other thing about diversity is geography. And the 3 black women on the council were all from Southwest Atlanta. And so when you look at the overall demographics, you also have to think about where people are from and that every part of the city is represented.
Interesting point. 15 seconds, you got a thought about that?
Well, one of the things, let me just say this, and I apologize, I think the ad went over the top to infer that Shipman was some sort of bigot. I agree with some of the other things you said, but I think that was over the top.
Well, no, I think doing the ad was a little too far and no different than the tactics up in D.C.
All right, there we go. Out of time for this segment. Winners and losers are next.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
All right, Martha, start us off.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I got to say my Georgia Bulldogs. It's Go Dogs, and I hope we are the 2-time national champions. But again, I'm going to make a winner this week, Marjorie Taylor Greene. I think she's shown some real leadership, and there's a lot of people to say, well, wait till next week. But you know what? We don't judge we judge based on what we got right now.
All right, Martha, thank you. What do you say?
First winner definitely is going to be the Dogs. Go Dogs. Wish them best on Monday night. And also definitely want to make Rodney Bullard a winner. Served at Chick-fil-A for a long time, stepped away this week to basically start his own nonprofit organization. And lastly, I want to make the Atlanta City Council members who all came together privately to try to basically move forward in the right direction. But I still think that Marcia Overstreet and Andrea Boone did the right thing by basically standing up for what they believed in.
Darren, thank you. Phil, what do you say?
I've got a couple of winners. Chris Womack is going to be named the new CEO of the Southern Company, and he's going to be replaced as the CEO of Georgia Power by Kim Green. I think they're winners there. And you know, last Monday night was a huge win for this country. You know, when DeMar Hamlin got injured in the game, the Bills player, you had two full NFL teams. You had 60,000 people in the stadium doing what? They were praying. And, you know, it kind of reaffirmed that, you know, our national motto is "In God We Trust." And I thought that was a wonderful unifying moment just to see that. I know some atheists and liberals won't like that, but I thought it was great.
Well, I think the whole country has been praying for them, atheists included, honestly, because it was something that galvanized the entire country. And just the fact that people around the U.S. and the world have given more than $7 million to his foundation. Best story
Of the week.
Yeah,
Yep.
fantastic.
Absolutely.
How about you?
Well, my winner is the person who selected the little blue velvet suit that Senator Warnock's son wore for his swearing in to go with a matching beret. He was probably the cutest congressional kid in all of those pictures.
Melita, thank you so much. Enjoy being with you. Lori will be back next week. Have a great rest of your Sunday, and as you said, go Dogs.
Go Dogs.
Get ready for the session. Got a great exciting session coming up.